Part 76. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 751. Chu Nanyi looked at Mo Lingan. Master Chen went to inspect the public sentiment. Yes, Mo Lingan nodded slowly. He is on the right path in his official career. It's only thanks to His Majesty's tolerance and ability to recognize people that he was not allowed to be punished along with the Wei prince's family. There is a good official in the court who serves the country and the people. Chu Nanyi pondered. There is currently no one in Mianzhou who can take charge of the family. After Mr. Chen returns to Beijing to report on his duties, he may be assigned to practice for a few years. Zhou Yushang listened to them in silence. Hearing this sentence, he couldn't help but be surprised. He is so young and transferred to Mianzhou alone. Can he take on the entire Mianzhou responsibility? During this time, he had gotten to know Xian Yuanchen a little bit. He inspected the disaster situation and always had the people's livelihood in mind. He was indeed a good official who rarely cared about the people. But Xian Yuanchen is indeed too young. Of course, youth is not the most important factor. After all, Xiejin and Xian Yuanyao are not very young, but they are both in high positions and hold great power. Xian Yuanchen's temperament is a little too soft, and he has a heart for the people, but he lacks courage. In addition to the several officials and profiteer business owners who have been arrested, there are more than 100,000 people in Mianzhou City. The family is also not easy to deal with, and it is not easy to deal with it. There are also local bullies, but they have become more peaceful during this period, and there are still some unruly people even among the most simple people. With Xian Yuanchen's temperament, it might be a great test for him to be transferred to Mianzhou for training. We are just guessing, Chu Nanyi said calmly. As for how to arrange the follow-up matters and who will take over the position of Mianzhou magistrate, it still depends on the wishes of the Prince Regent and Her Majesty the Queen. Zhou Yushang nodded and said no more. Chu Nanyi and Mo Lingan quickly got up and summoned their nearby men, intending to make business arrangements before Xiejin and Xian Yuanyao settled the accounts. Xiejin and Xian Yuanyao stayed in the room all day. As for whether they were sleeping or doing something else, outsiders didn't see it. They only knew that when the two came out of the room in the evening, they were both in high spirits. His expression exuded the luster of a well-fed man. The two of you seem to be very happy and have been comforted both physically and mentally. Isn't it time to appease the people of Mianzhou? Chu Nanyi was busy outside for a day, and when he came back, he saw the two of them beaming with joy, and he couldn't help but smile. Acid, I heard Mr. Chen say that Mr. Xie has been getting along very well with young Master Zone these 2 days. Chu Nanyi, are you boring? Xiejin frowned and glared at him. Xian Yuanchen is not a scheming and treacherous person like you. You'd better not teach him a bad lesson. Unlike Chu Nanyi and Mo Lingan, who were worried about the world being in chaos, and even different from Zhou Yushang, who intentionally or unintentionally stirred up dissension, Xian Yuanchen took the initiative to stay away from Xian Yuanyao and Xiejin in the past 2 days, and did not want to get involved in their affairs at all. This point still makes Xiejin quite satisfied, and he feels more and more that Chen's child is more reliable, much better than the two bad friends. Xian Yuanyao didn't say anything. It could be seen that Xiejin had coaxed this person into submission, so they all changed the subject wisely and started talking about business. After all, whether it's jealousy or settling scores, it's just a little fun outside of the business, and it can't be delayed for too long. After getting rid of that unhappy mood, you have to return to the business soon. Several of the officials and grain merchants who were raided had already become a team in Mianzhou. The profiteers colluded to line their own pockets. I don't know how much money they had embezzled over the years, fattening their appetites like bottomless pits. If we go back a few years ago, even the money spent on water control was pocketed by these corrupt officials. The grains in the granaries that were seized now can be used to compensate the local people. This saves the national treasury from continuing to allocate funds. With the grain payment, the people also have enough food to survive. In the next few days, Siejin arranged for reliable people to distribute the disaster relief funds to the people according to the newly compiled list, and after formulating a sufficiently detailed follow-up plan, he only needed to arrange for trustworthy subordinates to take charge of things here. Now that His and his officials have all been arrested and sentenced, it is necessary to re-elect officials responsible for flood control and house repairs in the shortest possible time. A group of dragons cannot be leaderless. No matter how powerful the flood control expert is, there should be someone to shoulder his responsibility. Live responsibility. Siejin and Xian Yuanyao work separately. Chu Nanyi and Mo Lingan also mobilized workers who could build houses from neighboring cities that were not affected by the disaster. Xian Yuanchen was directly arranged to follow Siejin for the past 2 days and watch him make decisions. Another busy 7 or 8 days have passed. All the tents were set up, and every household affected by the disaster had a place to stay. Food was distributed to the people, and workers were arranged. All the aftermath matters were almost handled. Xian Yuanyao ordered the Black Yao army to take care of everything. All the officials and profiteers who were guilty were taken into custody and prepared to return to the imperial capital. Everyone in the Zone family's house has taken care of it. Zone Yishang turned to look at Xian Yuanyao. Should we arrange some soldiers to guard it? Xian Yuanyao didn't want to pay attention to this person at all. Hearing this, he just said lightly, I have my own sense of propriety in doing things and don't need to be reminded by others. Chu Nanyi heard it. The smell of gunpowder in Xian Yuanyao's words was still very strong, and he was sure that the journey back to the imperial capital would never be boring. This boy from the sect was too courageous to dare to provoke a tiger. It was unbelievable. Life or death. You don't need to worry about the Zone family's house, Siejin said calmly. If you go to the imperial capital this time, if you are lucky enough to come back to Mianzhou, you will naturally be in charge of the Zone family. If you can't come back, there is no point in worrying about it. Zone Yishang was silent for a moment, then smiled extremely meekly and said, Master Xie is right. Xian Yuanyao looked at him expressionlessly and looked away calmly. Thank you, Master Xie, and Prince Yao for escorting the prisoners in front, while I and Lingan stay behind. Chu Nanyi suggested, young Master Zong and young Master Chen come with us. Siejin's lips curled up, feeling that Chu Nanyi finally said something human and did something human. Okay, he said, me and Yao Yao. I want to go with Mr. Xie. Zone Yishang said, I still have many plans to discuss with Mr. Xie. Chu Nanyi smiled kindly and said, it's okay to discuss it with me. Zone Yishang glanced at him, is Mr. Chu married? Already have a wife? Then I'm not interested in you. Chu Nanyi. I always thought that Master Zone was just putting on a show. Mo Lingan frowned, and the eyes on his face were thoughtful. Master Zone won't make the lie come true, right? Not really. Zone Yishang has never seen the relationship between Duangzi lovers, and it seems interesting to provoke others to be jealous. There is so much joy. Otherwise, how boring would it be for a few grown men to discuss business together? If young Master Zone is really interested in men, I will be happy to help you. Siejin said calmly, do you remember what I told you before? I can let you go to the brothel to pick up guests, so that you can meet all kinds of dignitaries every day. Maybe you can actually come across one you like. Zone Yishang was silent for a moment. What if I like you like this? Oh, Siejin raised his hand and hooked Xian Yuanyao's neck. If you are really interested in me, please ask my husband if he agrees, or are you sure you have enough skills to survive under the Obsidian Army? The Obsidian Army officers on standby all looked up at the sky, expressionless as if they were saying, why did their general find such a wife? Is this really the 9th master of the Xie family who is fearless, unruly, and arrogant? It feels very shameless. Window. Tabula equals window. Tabula. Tabula.push, mode, thumbspeed -01, container, tabula below article thumbnail -300 x 250, placement, Below article thumbnail -300x250, target. Type, mix. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 752. To be honest, acting is acting. Xiejin can play the role of a romantic and passionate playboy in the relationship between men and women, making people believe it easily. He can also quickly withdraw from the plot after the acting is over, keeping an absolutely safe distance. No one should try to take advantage of the situation here. Especially in not letting Xian Yuanyao have misunderstandings, he did a very good job. He would not deliberately make some inappropriate actions just to make Xian Yuanyao jealous, nor would he let people other than Xian Yuanyao mistakenly feel the affection that should not exist from him. So he flatly rejected Zhong Yishang's overt and covert goodwill. As for what Zhong Yishang was thinking, he could guess a little, but he was not interested in cooperating with him to continue the performance. After all, although the gold ingot is a good thing, it really hurts the knees after kneeling for a long time. Wouldn't it be better for him to have more rounds with Yao Yao? So the process of escorting the prisoners back to Beijing went smoothly. With the escort of the Obsidian Army, the long procession looked particularly spectacular. When passing through some famous hilltops, the vicious bandits would definitely stay away from them, who would dare to provoke the Imperial Army escorting prisoners. Moreover, even if the escorted prisoners were robbed, they could not be used as silver, but would cause big trouble. Staying away was the wisest decision. So the journey was smooth and the group arrived at the imperial capital in the hottest weather in mid-June. Outside the city gate, Xian Yuanyao ordered the soldiers to stop, and Yi stepped out. "I am here. Select 500 black obsidian soldiers, cooperate with the imperial guards, and take all the prisoners to the Ministry of Justice prison. I obey your orders." Xian Yuanyao turned his head and looked at the others. "The rest of you wait here, no one is allowed to act without the order of this general." The soldiers' voices were as dull as thunder, shocking their hearts. "I obey your orders." Zhong Yuchain looked at the young general sitting on the horse in silence, and a strange color flashed in his eyes. General Xian Yuan has an outstanding appearance and outstanding demeanor. Once he speaks, all the generals obey his orders. It is really a momentum that makes people awe and surrender, which is definitely not ordinary people can't compare. "What?" Amo Lingen rode over with the reins in his hand and said casually, "You abandoned Lord Xia and now you are interested in General Xian Yuan." Zhong Yushang sighed sadly, "Although Lord Xia is not so easy to deal with, at least I can still dream about him, but General Xian Yuan can't even dream about him." Amo Lingen raised his eyebrows. "Why?" Zhong Yushang said, "I'm afraid Lord Xia will cut me into pieces." Hearing this, Amo Lingen raised his lips slightly. "You are smart." Although Xian Yuanyao is also jealous, he usually just verbally abuses himself and will not vent his anger on others at will. Even if he is dissatisfied, he will only attack Xiejin. After all, military generals are upright and will not hurt people's lives at will unless the other party does something damnable. But the ninth master of the Xie family is not necessarily the case. His temperament is well known. If you really dare to covet his sweetheart, he has 100 ways to make your life worse than death. However, it is better for smart people not to recruit anyone. No matter if there is any special intention, a few jokes are fine, but if you really try to destroy the relationship between the two again and again, I am afraid that the end will never be good. The Obsidian Army took Xiejin's warrant and escorted the prisoners to the Ministry of Justice. Xiejin and Xian Yuanyao went to the palace to report without delay. The regent summoned several people in the Qinzhen Hall. This was the first time that Zhong Yuchain entered the imperial city, the first time he entered the palace, and the first time he met the legendary regent. As soon as they met, he overturned all his previous speculations and judgments about the regent. Perhaps only this man in front of him, who exuded a noble demeanor and pressure, could make men like Xiejin and Xian Yuanyao sincerely convinced and willing to be loyal. Only such a king could arrange disaster relief matters carefully and properly before the report on the flood in Mianzhou arrived in the capital, so that the people of Mianzhou could be saved from a famine. I have read all the memorials, and I have understood the details of disaster relief. You have done a good job. Rong Yu raised his eyes slightly and looked at the people kneeling on the ground. Whose credit is this time? Reporting to the Lord, disaster relief is not something that can be accomplished by one's own strength. I am just doing my job and dare not share the credit, Xie said, but Master Chen showed his concern for the country and the people during this disaster relief process. If the Lord wants to reward him according to his merits, he can give Master Chen some rewards. Xie has been promoted too quickly in the past 2 years. He does not plan to be promoted again by taking advantage of the disaster relief. Instead, Xianyuan Chen needs more experience. The higher the official position, the greater the responsibility. It will help him to exercise his courage and demeanor in his future behavior and work. I don't deserve it, Xianyuan Chen said respectfully. I have no experience in doing business. This time I went to Mianzhou and followed the orders of Lord Xie. Lord Xie dealt with corrupt officials, dealt with profiteers, and worked hard for the people. He was smart and courageous. I still have a lot to learn from Lord Xie. I don't dare to take credit. After the voice fell, the hall was quiet for a moment. Rong Yu looked through the files of the major officials brought back by Xie, as well as the evidence and list of collusion between officials and businessmen in Mianzhou. After all the files were read, he said lightly, the Zone family mentioned in the list was not taken back together. Reporting to the master, all the people in the Zone family from the old patriarch Zone Wei and the entire 4 branches were imprisoned in the Zone family house, Xie said, except Zone Yushang. Rong Yu closed the file and said lightly, get up. Several people stood up, only Zone Yuchang was still kneeling on the ground. Before the regent spoke to pardon him, he, the descendant of the Zone family, was still guilty. Rong Yu turned his eyes slightly and fell on the face of the beautiful boy, Zone Yuchang. His voice was cold and indifferent, but it was intimidating and made people dare not act rashly. Zone Yuchang lowered his eyebrows and kowtowed respectfully according to the court etiquette. Zone Yuchang, the youngest son of the 3rd branch of the Zone family, pays homage to the regent. Long live the regent, long live the regent, long live the regent. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 753. Rong Yu picked up the teacup, relaxed his body and leaned on the back of the chair, and said in a calm voice, do you want control of the Zone family? Zone Yushang lay on the ground and said in a respectful and dull voice, yes. The Zone family committed a serious crime that killed the 9 clans. Rong Yu said indifferently, what bargaining chip do you have that can make me make an exception for you and forgive them? The sinners dare not, Zone Yushang said. The sinners promise to repair the embankment of the Mian River before the rainy season next year, and promise that the flood will never happen again in their lifetime. If the sinners can gain the power of the Zone family, they will definitely assist Mianzhong in the future. As the new governor of Mianzhou, it is his duty to use most of the legitimate business income of the Zone family for the people, and to do his best to ensure the stability of the people of Mianzhou. I ask for the regent's grace. Rong Yu was silent for a moment. It's not that I don't have people who can control the water in my hands. The new officials in Mianzhou will also manage Mianzhou well and create a stable living environment for the hundreds of thousands of people in Mianzhou. These conditions of yours are not attractive to me. My strength is not enough for me to make an exception for you. Zone Yushang's heart sank and she froze in place. Xie and others stood aside and did not say anything about this. He had already told Zone Yushang that he could only agree to bring him to see the regent, but he had no right to promise any of his conditions. Cooperation with him is cooperation, and everything else depends on the wishes of his family master. Zhou Yushang felt that all the blood in his body was stiff. The bricks of Qinzhen Palace were so cold that his limbs were numb from the cold. The emperor who is above the 9 heavens can decide life and death with just one sentence. How much confidence and courage does he have to think that he has enough confidence to negotiate terms with the Prince Regent and Her Majesty the Queen? Based on what the Zhou family has done over the years, I have no reason to forgive them. Wrong. You pulled out a pile of information from the file. If you want to negotiate terms with me, you can only negotiate with your own life. I see since you have never participated in any criminal activity, I can be lenient with you. Zhou Yushang was confused for a moment. What he wants is to take revenge on the Zhou family, to trample those greedy and inhumane people in the Zhou family under their feet, and make them linger for the rest of their lives, living like pigs and dogs. He thought that the bargaining chip he held was enough to negotiate with the imperial envoy, but he did not expect that the imperial envoy did not act alone. He had so many powerful assistants, including Chu Nanyi, who was responsible for transporting grain and grass, Mo Lingan, who was responsible for intelligence, and there is Xian Yuanyao, who holds military power. As a result, the entire disaster relief process went surprisingly smoothly. As a chess piece of the Zhou family, he played a relatively small role in it. Except for the promises he made as exchange conditions, he did not have any advantages in other aspects. However, it was obvious that his only bargaining chip was against the regent. It was so small that it wasn't enough for him to make an exception. Zhou Yushang didn't speak again for a long time. When Xian Yuanchen, who was standing aside, heard the last words of the regent, he suddenly thought of his own situation. He and Zhou Yushang were actually similar in some aspects. When the Wei family was exiled, Xian Yuanchen was lucky enough to become Wei's son. The fish that slipped through the net in the Wangfu case and was able to participate in the imperial examination was only because Suan Yuanhua and Jia interceded for him in front of His Majesty because of the regent Wang Cai. Xian Yuanchen was glad that he had studied hard during those years and worked hard to be an upright and open person, otherwise he would not have had any success in his life. When a relative commits a crime, the whole family is implicated. This is a law that has been established since ancient times. Even if a family member is innocent of a serious crime, there is absolutely no reason to forgive it easily, unless you have enough skills to make an exception. The grievances Xian Yuanchen suffered from childhood are unfortunate, but it is his intellectual talent and benevolent heart that really made him reborn. Moreover, because he was not involved in the case of Prince Wei, he was able to save himself and his mother. 2 people survived. Similarly, the promise made by Zhou Yushang can prompt the regent to make an exception for him, but it is only for himself and will never let those criminals who should die become pardoned people. No matter what he wants to do after the pardon, even if it is revenge, is no reason to flout the law. His personal grievances with the clan family were not qualified to override the laws of the family and the country. The silence in Qinzhen Hall lasted for a long time, so much so that even Xiejin and Xian Yuanyao felt a little uneasy and wanted to speak to break the silence, but after much deliberation, they didn't know what to say. In the tense and solemn atmosphere, Xiejin suddenly realized that he seemed to have overlooked a more important piece of information. He frowned and tried hard to capture the light that flashed through his mind just now. At this moment, Rong Yu's cold voice sounded again. What's the name of the water control expert in your hand? What does it have to do with you? Xiejin suddenly came to his senses. Yes, the person who controls the water is the key. Zhou Yushang was silent for a moment. His surname is Hua, and his single name is Li Li. He is a descendant of the Mianzhou blacksmith family. Rosewood. This name seems familiar. Chu Nanyi turned to look at Mo Lingan. It seems to be someone under your command, right? Mo Lingan touched his nose. I was planning to bring him into the palace to pay his respects to the Lord. Zhou Yushang froze. Xiejin turned to look at Mo Lingan with a subtle expression. Your people. Mo Lingan nodded. Where are people now? Mo Lingan said, Huali has arrived in the western capital yesterday. I originally planned to wait for Zhou Yushang to meet the Lord before letting him come over to report the water control plan to the Lord. I didn't expect such a coincidence to actually tell Zhou Yushang what he said. It's the same person. Zhou Yushang felt powerless, and he finally understood that his wishful thinking was a joke from beginning to end. To be precise, Huali is not from Mianzhou, but he does come from a family of blacksmiths. In addition to being able to control water, he is also good at making weapons and armor. Mo Lingon smiled lightly. I spent a lot of money to win over this talent. In addition to tens of thousands of taels of silver, I spent 4 full months to eliminate his enemies, and then he was completely willing to serve Dongling. Having said this, he turned to look at Zhou Yushang. Young Master Zhou knows him because your biological mother is Huali's aunt, and they are both from the Yan Kingdom. As soon as these words came out, everyone else in the palace was surprised. Even Xiejin and Xian Yuanyao did not expect that there was such a secret. So Zhou Yushang's mother is from Yangguo? Doesn't Zhou Yushang have half of Yan Kingdom's blood flowing in his body? Zhou Yushang's face turned pale and she couldn't say a word. Xiejin thought of the eldest prince of the Yan Kingdom who came with the prince of northern Xinjiang. It seemed that the Yan Kingdom really produced beauties, especially the beautiful young men. If Zhou Yushang comes from the Yan Kingdom, his mother may have a high background. After all, such appearance is not seen everywhere. Tomorrow morning, I will see Huali. Rongyu said, since the members of the Zhou family have not been escorted to the imperial capital, there is no need to waste too much manpower. I will pass on the king's decree and grant them suicide to preserve the body. The body will be hung in Mianzhou. The city will be held in public for 3 days, so that the major grain merchants and newly appointed officials in Mianzhou will take a warning and must not prey on the people and make ill-gotten gains. After saying that, he raised his eyes and looked around. Rongyu's eyes fell on Xian Yuanyao, who is guarding the Zhou family's house now. I have left 100 black obsidian troops inside and outside the Zhou family. Xian Yuanyao replied, there are also several shadow guard masters that Xiejin brought from the martial arts pavilion, just in case. Rongyu hummed, Xiejin and Zhou Yushang are responsible for handling matters among the Zhou family. Window. Tabula equals window. Tabula. Tabula.push, mode, thumbspeed -01, container, tabula below article thumbnail -300x250, placement, below article thumbnail -300x250, target. Type, mix. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 754. This can be regarded as a disguised way of fulfilling Zhou Yuchang's idea of revenge on the Zhou family. Let those people he hate be forced to commit suicide in front of him, and watch those relatives who did not regard him as a human being in the past show hatred, despair, pleading, or resentment and curse on their faces. For Zhou Yuchang, perhaps he can get a little psychological satisfaction. And no matter how much the Zhou family hates, they will die in the end. My lord Xiejin hesitated for a moment, and couldn't help but speak, do I have to go back to Mianzhou again? If he is sent to Mianzhou to take office, does he have to stay in Mianzhou for 3 or 2 years? Rongyu said in a light tone, this king plans to let you and Xian Yuanchen go to Mianzhou to take charge of the subsequent flood control and post-disaster reconstruction, but you don't need to stay in Mianzhou for a long time. You can come back in half a year. At that time, Xian Yuanchen will stay in Mianzhou as the governor. Xian Yuanchen was surprised. He is the governor of Mianzhou. Xiejinming understood that the master was worried about Xian Yuanchen, worried that he was not experienced enough and courageous enough, and that he was unfamiliar with the local people in Mianzhou and could not fight against the remaining local forces, so he asked him to support him for a while. Tisk. He felt like Xian Yuanchen's father, teaching him how to be an official. As for Zhou Yuchang, I will give you a chance. Rongyu said indifferently, all the illegal income of the Zhou family will be confiscated, and you will take over the legitimate business on the surface. You don't have to hand over 70% of the income, just 50 minus 50. You keep 50% for the zone family's turnover and workers' salaries, and the other 50% will be handed over to the local government as a blessing to the people. If you can persist for 10 years, I will give you another reward. Zone Yachain thought he had heard it wrong. So the regent did not intend to punish him, but gave him a chance, except that the zone family was not pardoned. Other aspects barely met his request. The tense mind relaxed slightly. Zone Yachain kowtowed to express gratitude. The guilty people obey the order. Thank His Royal Highness the Regent for 1,000 years. The meeting ended. Go back and rest when you need to go back, and reorganize the troops when you need to reorganize the troops. Wrong, you said calmly. Everyone go down, don't be late for the morning court tomorrow. Xian Yuanyao said, my lord, I don't need to go to court. What nonsense are you talking about? Xiejin twisted his waist. We all go to court, but you are the only one who wants to be special. Xian Yuanyao turned his head and glanced at him. Who are you? It's just you and Xian Yuan Chen. Chu Nanyi and Mo Lingan didn't need to go to court, so naturally he, a military general, didn't need to go either, just concentrate on training the troops. Who would like to deal with those old foxes who are scheming in the court? Tomorrow morning, we will reward the merits. Why don't you come and try? Xiejin said in a faint voice. You don't want rewards. I don't need rewards, Xian Yuanyao answered very loyally. It is my duty to be loyal to the Lord. Xiejin's mouth twitched. Chu Nanyi and Mo Lingan shook their heads and left calmly. Wrong, you ignored them. Obviously, he did not intend to give a mandatory requirement for the court session. They could make their own judgment. If Xian Yuanyao felt that he should go to court, he could go. If he felt that it was unnecessary, he could choose not to go. Of course, not going would be regarded as giving up the reward. Zone Yachain will follow Xiejin. Wrong, you ordered. Xiejin will temporarily arrange his residence. Hearing this, Xian Yuanyao looked at Zone Yachain with a somewhat unkind look. After thinking about it, he decided that he should still go to court on time tomorrow. Although training soldiers is more important, the Black Obsidian Army has performed very well during this period, so it is okay for them to relax. Xiejin and Xian Yuanyao soon followed suit and left. Although Zone Yachain acted very fearless before entering the palace, the fact proved that no one was really fearless. In front of absolute power, he had to be as obedient as a cat to survive. As Xiejin and Xian Yuanyao left the palace, he was as quiet as air throughout the whole process. What happened to young Master Zone, Mo Lingan, who was waiting outside the palace, saw Zone Yachain following Xiejin out. He looks listless. Is he scared? Zone Yachain raised his head and looked at him expressionlessly, then lowered his eyes and remained silent for a moment. The regent is quite scary. As soon as this was said, the others fell silent. Xian Yuanyao glanced at him, thinking that you were quite arrogant before, but you turned out to be a coward. However, seeing that Zone Yachain was indeed a little frightened, he suppressed the ridicule that rolled to his throat. It was not the style of a military officer to kick someone when he was down. Besides, this person didn't do anything else excessive except being mean. As for why he was so scared, they could understand it. After all, the momentum and pressure of his master were not something that ordinary people could easily bear. Compared with the king's harsh words, the oppressive feeling of controlling life and death without making a sound was the most frightening. Besides, Zone Yachain was just a teenager after all. Xian Yuan Chen has been in the officialdom for such a long time, but he still doesn't have the courage to face the regent. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 755. Xiejin glanced at Mo Lingan. Did Chu Nanyi go back? Her Majesty heard that we were back, so she gave Miss Jingling a day off so that she could go back and accompany her husband. Mo Lingan said sourly, men with wives are different. They are eager to go home and wish they could stay in the inner house every day to spend time with their wives. But they made a man so weak that he has no manliness at all. As soon as he said this, Xiejin and Xianyuanyao looked at him at the same time. What, Amo Lingen threw away the fan, am I wrong? If you have the guts to not get married in this life, see if Lord Emo will break your legs. Xiejin jumped on the horse and turned to look at Xianyuanyao. Yao Yao, let's go back to the Xie family first, ignore him. Xianyuanyao got on his horse neatly. You take Zonyashang back and settle her first, I'll go to settle the Black Obsidian Army. Xiejin frowned, thinking of the Black Obsidian Army still waiting outside the city gate. His eyebrows slightly frowned. I'll go with you. Are you done? Xianyuanyao frowned and glared at him. Do you have to be as clingy as a little girl? Amo Lingen chuckled. Master Xieju has also had this day. Xiejin took a deep breath, just wanting to twist Amo Lingen's head off and kick it like a ball. You go back first, Xianyuanyao said. I'll be there in half an hour. The soldiers of the Black Obsidian Army were all people who obeyed military orders. He just had to go out and give orders. It was not like taking care of children and taking them back to the barracks one by one. It wouldn't take long. Besides, the soldiers had worked hard on this trip, so they should go back and have a good rest. Xiejin didn't say anything else. After all, they were only separated for half an hour. After returning to the Xie family, he asked someone to arrange accommodation for Zonyashang, a little far away from Jinyuan, so that they would not see each other when they looked up or down. Young Master Zone rarely spoke again, and quietly followed the servants of the Xie family to the wing room. The return of the ninth master made the Xie family mansion busy in an instant. People were welcoming and serving him. The servants of Jinyuan quickly prepared hot water for the young master who had returned from a long journey to take a bath, and ordered the kitchen to prepare more dishes that the young master liked. Xiejin did not forget to ask for a few dishes that Xianyuanyao liked to eat, so the servants knew that Prince Yao would come later, and Jinyuan was busy inside and outside. After taking a bath and changing clothes, Xiejin went to see his mother, greeted her, and soon returned to Jinyuan. Not long after, Xianyuanyao came. It can be seen that he came on horseback. Xiejin prepared clothes for him, and smiled gently like a good wife and mother. I have asked someone to prepare hot water. Yao Yao, take a bath first. Xianyuanyao coughed lightly and nodded calmly, okay. So Xiejin took him to take a bath. Xianyuanyao does not have his own residence in the imperial capital yet. He has not lived in the Huainan palace before and is not used to it. Since he confirmed his relationship with Xiejin, he usually lives in the big tent in the military camp and comes to Xie's house when he has time. He is already familiar with the layout of Jinyuan, just like staying at home. Xiejin has already washed and is now concentrating on serving his sweetheart. While serving, he said, you didn't plan to stay in Jinyuan at all, right? Xianyuanyao didn't understand what he meant. What do you mean? The master asked us to go to court early tomorrow morning. Why do you say we don't have to go? Xianyuanyao leaned against the bathtub and frowned at him. I have never been to court before unless there is something particularly important. When has he ever been to court? Will it be the same tomorrow? Xianyuanyao had a strange expression. I don't need a reward. Hearing this, Xiejin couldn't help but raise his hand and pinch Xianyuanyao's face. I really admire you. What's wrong with me? Xianyuanyao slapped his hand away. Are you deliberately looking for trouble? Xiejin said, after returning from meritorious service outside, the master usually gives 2 days off. Since you are given leave, you should naturally live with me. Since we live together, shouldn't we go to court together tomorrow morning? You are still thinking about going back to the barracks. Don't you want to stay with me at all? Xianyuanyao touched his nose. I don't have that idea. Xiejin sneered, still quibbling. Didn't I follow you again? Xianyuanyao glared at him. The soldiers of the Obsidian Army are also working hard, but you only think about yourself. Since you know that the Obsidian Army is working hard, why can't you give them 2 days off? Xian Yuanyao was speechless. I have just told Enyi and Yufan that they will have 2 days off tomorrow and the day after tomorrow. Although it sounds like the commander still wants to be lazy, the Obsidian Army should indeed have a day off. The rotation in the barracks cannot be messed up. Half of the people will rest tomorrow and half of them will rest the day after tomorrow. He has asked Enyi and Yufan to arrange it? Xiejin raised his eyebrows, and the corners of his mouth suddenly raised a playful arc. Are you afraid that I will do something to Zonyashang, so you followed me in a hurry? Shut up! Xian Yuanyao was instantly angry. Stop talking nonsense to me. If you are jealous, just say it directly, don't be so hypocritical. Xiejin couldn't help but pinch his face again. Is it because you see Zonyashang living in the Xie family, so you have to guard her in person to feel at ease? Xian Yuanyao looked at him expressionlessly. Are you going to say that I don't trust you again? Of course not. Xiejin smiled. I am very happy that Yao Yao can be jealous occasionally, which shows that Yao Yao cares about me. Xian Yuanyao snorted. After taking a bath, Xiejin helped him dry his body, put his arm around his waist, and leaned in to kiss his chin. Yao Yao, I just like you. Although the Lord asked me to temporarily settle him, Yao Yao, don't worry, I will never meet him unless absolutely necessary, let alone have any physical contact with him. Xian Yuanyao felt that this posture was too uncomfortable, so she pushed his face away, patted away his restless paws, took the outer robe and put it on, turned and walked towards the inner room. Xiejin followed him and saw Xian Yuanyao sitting silently on the edge of the bed, looking at him with rare quiet eyes. What's wrong? Xiejin raised his eyebrows. Now that I'm going to Mianzhou, I have to be separated for another half a year. Xian Yuanyao sighed melancholy. I don't know what kind of monster you are going to do if you leave under my nose. It's hard for me to feel better. The corner of Xiejin's mouth twitched slightly, and then he chuckled. As for Yao Yao saying that about me, if you can't bear it, just say you can't bear it. You have to be tough. You'd better be good to me. If you let me hear any rumors again, I will divorce you when you come back. Xiejin chuckled. I will keep myself clean and build Xian Yuanchen like Yao Yao's military training, so that he can stand alone as soon as possible, so that I can come back to reunite with you sooner. Xian Yuanyao looked at him silently for a while, and finally put his arms around his waist. Well, I really can't bear to leave you. Half a year is a long time. Xiejin also felt a little melancholy. I can't bear to leave you either. A short farewell is better than a wedding, Xian Yuanyao said. After you go to Mianzhou and come back, you will be the mainstay of the court. Xian Yuanchen will also complete his political achievements and return to the court to take charge of the humorous minister. Xiejin frowned. My lord, I treated you as my son before, but now I want to treat Xian Yuanchen as my son. Xian Yuanchen will have a smooth career in the future, and he won't let me take care of him until I die. What do you think I want? Xian Yuanyao had a strange expression. You mean, I will give the lord a pension in the future? Xiejin quickly covered his mouth. It's best not to say anything treasonous or treasonous. If it reaches the ears of the Lord, your flesh and blood will suffer again. Xian Yuanyao pulled down his hand. My lord is not much older than me, how can you raise me as your son? Stop talking nonsense. I was just making an analogy. Xian Yuanyao leaned on the bedside. My lord, he only pays attention to the talents he values. Xian Yuanchen is a good young man who can be a good official for the country and the people, but he is timid and lacks courage. In fact, according to my opinion, he should be thrown into the military camp for a period of training to develop a strong body, so that he can become stronger in other aspects as well. Xiejin heard this and said thoughtfully, this is a good suggestion. Xian Yuanchen, who had just returned home to have dinner with his mother and wife, suddenly shuddered. Lin Jie raised her eyes and looked at him. What's wrong? It's okay. Xian Yuanchen smiled warmly. I suddenly felt a little cold just now. Cold? Lin Jiao was surprised. It's already mid-June now. The sun outside is so strong that it can bake people to death. It's been so hot these 2 days that my mother and I don't want to go out. Jiao nodded, it's really hot. Xian Yuan Chen hummed. He also knew that the weather was hot, so he shivered for some reason. Very strange. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 756. After returning from disaster relief in Mianzhou, they investigated and punished a group of corrupt officials and profiteers. Xie Jin and Xian Yuan Chen, the legitimate sons of the Xie family, made another great contribution. In the morning of the next day, the regent announced that Xian Yuan Chen would be promoted to Mianzhou magistrate. In August, he would go to Mianzhou to officially take office. He also selected several top 3 Jinqi scholars from the Ministry of Household Affairs who had passed the examination with Xian Yuan Chen and Xie Jin the year before. They are some young and ambitious men who have performed admirably in the past 2 years. 2 of them have been promoted to magistrates of 2 counties under Mianzhou, and the others have received some auxiliary official positions, big or small. Xian Yuan Chen didn't think too much about the arrangement of the regent, and only accepted the order respectfully. However, Xie Jin already understood that the Lord was starting to cultivate cronies for Xian Yuan Chen. No matter how strong his political achievements were, he could not do much by himself. Ming Jun still needs enough strong ministers to assist him, let alone a small 5th-rank official like Xian Yuan Chen. And if these young people who went to Mianzhou with him today perform well in the future, there is a high chance that they will follow Xian Yuan Chen back to the imperial capital and serve as officials in the capital. By then, Xian Yuan Chen will have 2 years of overseas service. With outstanding political achievements, one can naturally gain a firm foothold in the court and become the mainstay of the court. Her Majesty the Queen has not been in court since she gave birth to the 2nd prince. The regent's rise to power in recent years has left a deep deterrent in the minds of the ministers. Naturally, the other ministers will not have any objections to the arrangement of Xian Yuan Chen's release, even if there are some thoughts in my heart that I will never bring up in court. But they all knew that the regent now trusted Xie Xiaofu, Prime Minister Liu, Prince Jing, and other cabinet veterans, and was also training young ministers. As long as they were capable and loyal, they would not worry about not having the chance to be promoted. The regent has his own rules and standards for employing people. Others can't even get in through the back door to build relationships, because no one dares to play these tricks under the nose of the regent. Although countless positions in various departments of the court require people, and it is impossible for him to see every position, he can prevent anything he does not want to see happen by simply placing people he trusts in the power centers of each department. Xie Jin handled the case of Shang Ningyun's family, and now he has contributed to disaster relief in Mianzhou. He has outstanding ability and courage. I am very pleased. Rong Yu's voice was indifferent and majestic. Since Su Ce was dismissed from his post and investigated, the Ministry of Household Affairs the post of minister has been vacant for a long time. From now on, Xie Jin will temporarily take charge of the Ministry of Finance and will make adjustments later. All civil and military officials in the dynasty were shocked. This Xie Jin was promoted too quickly. How could he take over the power of the Ministry of Revenue? Thank you, the regent, for your kindness in front of the civil and military officials of the court. Xie Jin always had a humble attitude and perfect etiquette, making it difficult for anyone to find fault. I will work harder to serve His Majesty and the regent in the future, and I will do my best for the country and the people. Don't say goodbye. Xie Xiaofu, who was ranked first among the ministers, nodded quite proudly. His son was becoming more and more aware of being a minister. The scene in the court was described in detail. He used to hang out in the major brothels in the imperial city, which made all the young men jealous. Compared with the ninth master of the Xie family, he seems to have been completely reborn. In just 2 years, he actually achieved the position of minister, and he was still in charge of 2 ministries at the same time. He was even more prosperous than he was back then. Xian Yuanyao was also happy for Xie Jin. The most unhappy person is probably Mr. Ye, the Minister of Household Affairs. He originally thought that with his qualifications, he should be a minister, but he didn't expect that a rising star would usurp the position of minister. I was really upset. Master Ye felt very uncomfortable when he thought that he, who was over 50 years old, would have to listen to the command of a young man who was still young. However, the regent's order had been issued. Who dared to say anything? Who allowed Xie Jin to be favored by the regent? The discussion on disaster relief matters is over, and the commendation should be rewarded, and the warning should be warned. In any case, the case of collusion between profiteers in Mianzhou still sounded the alarm in the court. Rong Yu was telling them that even if the sky is high and the emperor is far away, even if he is hiding behind, as long as you seek ill-gotten gains or do things that violate the law and damage people's livelihoods, no one can expect to escape. Half an hour later, Rong Yu announced the dismissal of the court. Some people said congratulations to Xie Jin, intentionally or unintentionally trying to get close to each other. Someone said hello to Xian Yuanyao, who was standing next to Xie Jin, and several young people who were not yet qualified to be in the court but were summoned because of the release, were courteous and courteous. After meeting Xie Jin and Xian Yuanyao, De followed Xian Yuanchen to Qinzhen Hall. Although he will take office in August, it is always a good idea to prepare early. Xian Yuanyao and Xie Jin went to the Dajhan Palace to meet the queen, just in time for the prince to finish class in the morning. Xian Yuanqi was holding the Prince Hao in one hand and his son in the other, and was standing outside the Dajhan Palace talking to Chu Hongii. Prince Xie Jin stepped into the palace gate calmly and nodded gracefully. Prince, get out of, class is over. Xian Yuanqi turned around with a smile on his lips. Thank you, Lord Yao. Xian Yuanyao looked at the 2 children standing beside him. Even if he didn't know who their father was in advance, he could tell whose son they were from the appearance of the 2 children. Hao was carved from the same mold as his father. This has been recognized. There is no need to go into details. The 2-year-old Zhana's face is also carved from pink and jade. He is almost exactly like Xian Yuanqi, except for his eyebrows and eyes. Shen Yun inherited a bit of heroic spirit from Chu Hongii, which is a perfect combination of the advantages of her father and mother. Xian Yuanyao knelt down and said, His Royal Highness. Hao glanced at him expressionlessly, and her soft and tender voice was naturally cold. Uncle Yao. Xie Jin raised his eyebrows. The child on Xian Yuanqi's right was a few months younger than Hao. When he heard the prince speak, he followed and called out, I want books. Although the 2-year-old child spoke clearly, he was not so fast in understanding vocabulary. He just followed the name. As for which word it was and what it meant, it was still a bit esoteric for them. Xian Yuanyao gently rubbed the 2 children's heads. Be good. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 757. The group quickly entered the Taisho Palace. The 2 children, Hao and Zhan, were already very familiar with the Dajhan Palace. They first walked up to the regent and bowed respectfully to say hello. Their small bodies were upright and they looked very cute. After saying hello, the 2 of them entered the inner hall in a familiar manner, greeted Her Majesty the Queen, and then looked at the baby sleeping on the bed with bright eyes, as if looking at a novel toy. Since Zhan was born, Hao has been a distinguished elder brother. Every time he returns to Dajhan Palace after class, he will come over to watch for a while. Sometimes if Zhan is awake, he will talk to him, although Zhan is temporarily still don't understand. But that doesn't stop him from being a good and conscientious brother. Xian Yuanqi's Zhan is younger than Hao, and her articulation is not as clear and smart as Hauer. After all, for children who are babbling, 1 month is a gap, not to mention that they are almost half a year apart. But in a few years, when the children are 6 or 7 years old, this half-year gap will be negligible. The weather was hot, and ice cubes were placed in the Dajhan palace to cool down. After going to court, Rongyu was still reading the files and memorials submitted by Xiejin yesterday. The collusion between Mianzhou officials and businessmen was very involved, and it affected the livelihood of hundreds of thousands of people. He could not be negligent. Even the crimes committed many years ago were dug up by Xiejin, among which Zhou Yushang worked hard. This is why Rongyu made an exception and spared him. He has always been generous in rewarding those who have made meritorious deeds. Xiejin and Xian Yuanyao walked into the Dajhan palace, greeted Her Majesty the Queen and the Regent, and asked for a few days' leave. Xiejin traveled a long distance to handle the case, so he deserves a few days of rest. Her Majesty the Queen, who has always been gentle and considerate to her ministers, passed the message to Xian Yuanchen, asking him to stay at home to spend more time with his mother and wife, and then make good preparations for his appointment. There is no need to enter the palace for these 2 days. Xiejin expressed his gratitude sincerely. Thank you, Her Majesty the Queen, for your grace. Xian Yuanqi and Chu Hong'ai stayed in the Dajhan palace for a while. They both found it funny to see their son reluctantly looking at the baby on the bed. However, they had to go home for dinner at noon, so the couple quickly took their son and left. Xiejin and Xian Yuanyao understand better than anyone else that if there is no serious matter, they had better not get in front of the Lord and His Majesty. Even if something happens, they should finish the matter and leave as soon as possible, and do not disturb the quiet time of their Lord and His Majesty. So the two of them did not stay too long, and soon left the Dajhan palace, leaving only a family of 4 in the Dajhan palace enjoying themselves. I'm going to Mianzhou in August, and I still have a month to rest. Nan 11 walked to the side of the imperial court and sat down next to Rongyu. Since the Black Obsidian Army has performed well, these 2 days let Xiejin and Xian Yuanyao get together more. Firstly, the overall strength of the Obsidian Army is strong, and they performed well in Mianzhou this time, which is in line with Rongyu's expectations for Xian Yuanyao. Secondly, Xiejin will go to Mianzhou in August, and the two will not be able to meet again for at least half a year. Juju can be used as compensation. Sanlai is now catching up with the summer season, and the training of the Obsidian Army officers can be relaxed a little, without being too strict. The army also needs a little warmth. It would not be a bad idea to make up for the lost progress in the summer when the weather gets cooler. Anyway, Xiejin will not be in the imperial capital by then, and Xian Yuanyao will have no reason to be lazy. Why not concentrate on training the army? Rongyu leaned over and kissed her face. 11 Er Shengming. Nan 11 smiled slightly. Her Majesty the Queen, who had given birth to 2 children, had softer and softer eyebrows. Her whole body was full of gentle charm and maternal brilliance. A woman bathed in happiness would have an indescribable charm that made people feel happy. The more you look at it, the happier you become, and you can't help but be infected by it and make your mood brighter. Rongyu put down the file, reached out and pulled her into his arms, lowered his head and kissed her brow. Do you want to go out for a walk? Going out for a walk? Nan 11 snuggled next to him. The weather is so hot, where can we go for a walk? Besides, Zhaner is so young, do you have the heart to leave him in the palace? 2 simple and realistic questions instantly dismissed Rongyu's thoughts. After a moment of silence, he said, if Hauer were older, we could leave Zhaner to him, but forget it for now, he is still young and can't take care of his younger brother. Hauer, who was staying in the inner hall, was playing with his younger brother's little hand. He didn't know if he heard his father's words. A pair of obsidian eyes fell on his younger brother's little face, and he was secretly thinking about when his younger brother would be able to get out of bed and walk. Can you talk and then study with him? He imagined a little guy following behind him, and the corners of his mouth raised a little. The weather in June is getting hotter day by day. The sun was scorching, the heat wave was blowing against my face, and even the occasional breeze in the air was scorching. Unless there is something special, the dignitaries would like to stay in the house at 12 o'clock a day without going out. If possible, put a few basins of ice cubes in the house to relieve the heat. If not, try to find a cool shade of a tree as much as possible. It's better to stay there than to go out and get burned by the sun. Xiejin and Xianyuanyao are martial arts practitioners, and their tolerance to the cold and scorching heat is naturally good, but the bright sun is still something people can't avoid, so Xiejin chose to stay with Xianyuanyao in Jinyuan to cultivate their relationship and compete with each other. The art of war and martial arts, each showing their own handwriting and calligraphy, can also be regarded as fun. But most of the time I am doing some indescribable things. Exercise is good for physical and mental health. Xiejin has always been a smart person. Although he cannot blatantly guess the monarch's heart, he still has a delicate heart. At least he can roughly figure out the tolerance of the Lord and Her Majesty the Queen towards them without violating the bottom line. Therefore, by using this time he had the chance to help in disaster relief, so he insisted on keeping Xianyuanyao in Jinyuan for 8 days. It happened to be in the past few days that Xiejin and Xianyuanyao, who had not been to the banquet for a long time, received a message from the Ji family. The eldest son of Ji held a tea party at home and invited several young men from the imperial capital to have tea. In addition to Xiejin and Xianyuanyao, Chu Xuanyi, Mo Lingan, Xianyuanqi and Lu Konglin, the eldest son of Lu, were also invited. "Why don't you have a tea party when you're not at home to escape the heat on a hot day?" Xianyuanyao frowned while twisting the post. "Isn't it that Ji's eldest son wants to have a relationship with you? Xiejin is really in the limelight now. He is the only minister in the court who is in charge of the Ministry of Household Affairs and the Ministry of Justice at the age of 20. Even Xie Xiaofu did not rise as fast as him back then. Except for Xiejin's outstanding ability. In addition, the regent's preference was obviously noticed by the ministers, so it was normal for a young master from aristocratic families to want to have a good relationship with him. Xiejin lazily leaned on the bedside, frowning and thinking for a moment. "To be honest, I really don't know what his intention is this time. Ji's eldest son is not a student, so he probably has no intention of becoming an official. Of course, I don't rule out the idea that he wants to use my relationship to get through the back door. Otherwise, as you said, wouldn't it be better to stay quietly in the house on a hot day?" Xianyuanyao walked to him, sat down on the edge of the bed, and threw the invitation on the table. "Are you going? The Ji family is Princess Jing's natal family, so we still have to give this face." Xiejin said, "The Ji family has been prosperous in the past, but since Mr. Ji passed away, the generations of these children are not as good as the previous ones. Otherwise, there is no need to climb up to me. Even my cousin Xianyuanqi can give them some support. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered." Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 758. Xianyuanyao thinks what he said makes sense. The old lady of the Ji family once served in the cabinet. Back then, the Ji family was a well-known and powerful family. It was still very prosperous when they married Prince Jing 20 years ago. However, after the old lady passed away, the current master of the Ji family, that is, Jing the princess's elder brother Ji Changjia, failed to inherit his father's ability. Although he had knowledge, his qualifications were mediocre. After so many years, he only reached the position of Minister of the Ministry of Industry, and it was difficult to be promoted further. For ordinary subjects, the official position of a fourth-grade minister is not low, but among the royal family and dignitaries, it is somewhat difficult to take advantage of. The generation of Ji Changjia's son Ji Dongli was even more mediocre. He couldn't read well and had no hope of an official career. He was even more afraid of hardship when joining the army. Fortunately, the Ji family had the shadow of their ancestors and the in-laws of Prince Jing's palace. In these years, they are still among the nobles, and they are more prosperous than ordinary aristocratic families. If the masters in power of this generation were not Nan 11 and Rong Yu, Ji Dongli might still be able to rely on nepotism to work as a sinner in the court and get a salary. After all, whether it was Prince Jing or Xian Yuanqi, just a slight promotion would be enough to maintain Ji Dongli. The majestic scenery of the home. It's just that the regent is someone who can't get dirt out of his eyes. If he wants to live his life, he can only hang out at home. It's a delusion to get his salary for nothing and not work. Prince Jing and his son were very familiar with their master's temperament and would probably not test the law personally. Early the next morning, the two of them prepared to go to the Ji family's appointment. Xian Yuanyao didn't know much about the Ji family. The king of Huainan had guarded the border for many years. Xian Yuanyao was born in Huainan, so he was unfamiliar with most of the powerful families in the imperial capital. After Xiejin's explanation, he understood the current status of the Ji family. I don't know much about how the ranks of powerful families in the imperial capital are divided, and I have no interest in knowing. Xian Yuanyao stood in front of the mirror, carefully arranging his clothes, but no matter how mediocre the Ji family is, as long as Prince Jing's palace is prosperous, the Ji family he has a place among the dignitaries of the imperial capital. As long as the Ji family does not commit suicide, others will think highly of the Ji family, even if they only look at the face of Prince Jing's palace. Moreover, the ancestors of the Ji family are also high-ranking officials after all. In private, the influence of large and small should not be small. The power doesn't fade away so quickly. Xiejin walked up behind him and pinched his waist with both hands, as if he could pinch him with both hands. Yao 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 is so thin, it doesn't look like a military general's waist. It doesn't look like a military commander's waist. Could it be that it looks like a dancing girl's? Xian Yuanyao glanced at him. Be careful with your appearance in the morning. What image do you want in your room? I wish Yao Yao didn't wear any clothes. Xian Yuanyao was used to hearing his non-vegetarian words, so he just glared at him. Are you going to Ji's house yet? I don't want to go. Xiejin Kong stretched out his hand to restrain him. I want to tear Yao Yao's clothes to pieces and not leave this house today. You're so horny early in the morning. Xian Yuanyao swatted his hand away. Hurry up and get ready, we're going to leave soon. It's been prepared a long time ago, Xiejin said with a smile. Should we take a carriage or ride a horse? Horse, a horse, Xian Yuanyao said without hesitation. I don't want to ride in a carriage. Xiejin raised his eyebrows. Isn't it good to ride in a carriage? You can also whisper something in the car and do things you don't want others to see. Xian Yuanyao was silent for a moment, then suddenly reached out and pinched his face. Xiejin, you are so thick-skinned that no one in the world can pierce it even with the sharpest sword. Xiejin chuckled. Yao Yao, do you want to stab him with your sword? Xian Yuanyao said expressionlessly, bring the sword. Yao Yao is so patient. Xiejin bit his earlobe. Aren't you afraid of becoming a widower? Xian Yuanyao calmly said, you can't kill him even if you stab him. What kind of widower do you want to be? What if I miss it? Then I will marry more lovely wives and concubines, in order to dilute my longing for you as soon as possible. Xian Yuanyao raised his lips and smiled slyly. If I have a son, I will definitely let him burn 3 sticks of incense in the morning and evening, and remember it well. With you. Xiejin sighed. Yao Yao is really cruel. The author has something to say. Update today, take a day off. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 759. Xian Yuanyao and Xiejin lingered in the room for a while before going out. When they arrived, several other people had already arrived. The weather was hot in summer, So Mr. G chose a pavilion with a nice view. There were many flowers planted outside. The trees outside the pavilion were shaded so densely that the sun couldn't come in, so it was a cool place. The G families made prepared tea, iced watermelon, and iced sour plum soup, and presented them one by one. The gentlemen took their seats in the pavilion. There was a separate pear-wood tea table. There were fruit plates, tea, sour plum juice, and some delicious snacks on the table. There is plenty of food and drink, so feel free to use it as you please. Xianyuan Chi, Chu Swanyi, Mo Lincoln, Mo Suanwuo, Xianyuan and Lu Konglin were sitting in the pavilion chatting. Xianyuan Yao and Xiejin were led into the pavilion by servants of the Ji family. Ji Dongli stood up and greeted him, "Thank you, Sir Yao. Please take a seat quickly." Xiejin took a casual look and saw that there were not many people there. There were a few familiar people who had appeared frequently when he was more active in Junkin in the past 2 years. There were also a few people he didn't meet often, but they were all the legitimate sons of the family. Lu Konglin's father was Prime Minister Lu, the son of a powerful minister, and he had to give him face no matter how others looked for him. Chu Swanyi and Mo Suanwu are also not very active, but given their family background, no one dares to underestimate them. Ji Dongli invited so many legitimate sons of aristocratic families to come over today and put on such a show. It seemed that they were just for the purpose of building relationships. He wanted to use such a tea party to build a good relationship with the royal celebrities, but he couldn't show it too obviously, so we also invited Mo Suanwu, Xianyuan and Chu Swanyi, 3 people who rarely showed their faces. However, Xiejin always felt that things were not that simple. "Thank you, Lord Yao." Seeing Xianyuan Yao and Xiejin coming over, several people in the pavilion stood up to greet them out of politeness. There was no distinction between superiority and inferiority. Most men were polite when meeting each other and could not be too arrogant. "Prince Yao, please sit over here." Xianyuan pointed to the spot left by his predecessor. "It's rare to sit down and gather together today, and I feel very happy." Xianyuan Yao glanced at the seat, but without saying anything, he walked over and sat down, brushing his clothes. Xiejin sat between Xianyuan Chi and Lu Konglin, with Xianyuan Chi on the left, Lu Konglin on the right, and Xianyuan Yao on the opposite side. There is no need to show affection in public when you are a guest in someone else's house. Besides, there is a distance between the seats, so it doesn't matter whether they sit together or not. The weather has been too hot these 2 days, so I have nothing to do. I have long wanted to invite you all to come and get together, but all of you are busy, so I don't have the nerve to disturb you. Ji Dongli behaved like a master, and his hospitality was pretty good. Zhou couldn't find anything wrong in every aspect. The prince's cousin is now the prince's tutor. He is busy giving lessons to the prince all day long. It is not easy to meet him normally. Xianyuan Chi smiled faintly. "The regent loves me, I just play with the prince with help, I am not a great tutor." "How can it be true that His Majesty's personal title of Grand Tutor can be false?" Ji Dongli smiled kindly. "Cousin, there is no need to be humble. This is such a glorious thing. It is too late for Dongli to envy you." Xianyuan Chi smiled faintly, reached out and pinched a crystal clear grape from the fruit plate and stuffed it into his mouth without saying anything else. "Mister, it's all a bit more colorful." Xiejin accepted the compliment calmly and said calmly, "Master Ji is very eloquent and makes people feel comfortable when he praises you." "Thank you, sir. You are a rare young talent," Lu Konglin continued. "He is a role model for our generation." Xiejin raised his eyebrows. "Master Lu is too praised." "What Mr. Lu said is true. Mr. Xie is indeed worthy of our serious study." Xianyuan prayed. "He has received the power of 2 ministers at a young age. He has a bright future, but we can't keep up with him." Xiejin glanced at him leisurely. "Your Majesty, you don't have to be so humble. You don't need to flatter me to be better than me. Not everyone is qualified to be the crown prince and tutor. Besides, your daughter-in-law is even more popular in front of Her Majesty the Queen. People are replaceable. It's okay for others to envy me. You'd better save yourself. Are you two flattering each other, or are you sincerely humble? Chu Xuanyi sneered. Compared to me, a scholar who is still studying in the Imperial College, you two have reached the top of an untouchable mountain, and are you humble in front of me? Why? Sorry. Xiejin turned his head, patted the ground slowly, and said apologetically, why did I forget? Mr. Chu, please don't mind, I just took the scientific examination a few years earlier than you. Even if you started late, as long as you have the will, you can still catch up. Chu Xuanyi took a sip of tea and said calmly, I'm not in a hurry. Being famous at a young age is not necessarily a good thing. I'm worried that I won't be able to calm down and make a big mistake. There's nothing wrong with joining an official later. Calm. Xiejin nodded, Master Chu, this idea is right. Speaking of the husband and wife, Xian Yuanqi suddenly smiled lightly. Xiejuyi is enjoying a smooth ride in the court, rising all the way up, while Crown Prince Yao is in the military camp with great military prowess. Don't you two have the same success? As much grace as possible. As soon as these words came out, the atmosphere in the pavilion became slightly quiet. Xian Yuanyao took a bite of the watermelon. He felt that the Ji family's attitude towards hospitality was really good. The fruits they prepared were fresh and delicious, with just the right amount of sweetness and coldness. It felt refreshing and comfortable in the stomach. As for the tit-for-tat confrontation between the few gentlemen present, he didn't care how much was sincere and how much was fake. Except for him and Mo Suanwu, everyone else present was a civil official. They had different styles and different ideas in their heads. He didn't have so many thoughts in his mind. He could leave such a scene to Xiejin. He had no interest in dealing with it. Xiejin was about to speak, but saw two maids in pink dresses coming over with freshly brewed herbal tea. They added a cup of tea to the tea table in front of each guest and some freshly cut fruits to the fruit plate. The maid opposite came to Xian Yuanyao's table with a tray. When she lowered her head to put the fruit, her hand suddenly tilted, and the herbal tea on the tray that had not been put down in time fell towards Xian Yuanyao. Even though Xian Yuanyao reacted quickly and dodged in time, some tea was still splashed on his robe. The pavilion suddenly became quiet. The maid seemed to have not expected this, and was completely frightened. She immediately put down the tray and knelt down, her face pale, begging for mercy in fear, Master, please forgive me. I didn't mean it, I deserve death. I really didn't mean it. What's wrong? You are so irritable, you can't do even the smallest things well, Ji Dongli said angrily, someone. Drag her out. I know I was wrong, Master, spare my life, the maid begged for mercy in fear, I really didn't mean it, I. Okay, Xian Yuanyao frowned, she really didn't mean it, and it wasn't a big deal, just a few drops of water splashed on her clothes, there is no need to make such a fuss. Ji Dongli was still angry, Master Yao is generous, it is the maid's blessing. If it were normal, she would have to be beaten a few times to correct the rules. It's really outrageous. As he said to the maid, Master Yao doesn't blame you, it's your good fortune today, why don't you take Master Yao down to change clothes? Yes, the maid kowtowed and thanked, I will take Master Yao to change clothes now. No need, Xian Yuanyao said lightly, no need to bother. It's okay for a grown man's clothes to be a little dirty. It's nothing. Besides, it's just a few drops of tea stains, which can't be seen without careful observation. Xian Yuanyao is not so hypocritical. Master Yao, please don't refuse, Ji Dongli apologized, it was my maid who was reckless and accidentally bumped into Master Yao. There are always clean clothes in the guest room that have not been worn. Please bear with it, Master Yao, otherwise I will feel bad. Feel bad? Xian Yuanyao frowned. What's wrong with that? Literati really like to be particular about what they do. Master Ji feels guilty. Prince Yao, why don't you go change it? Xian Yuanqi said, it won't take long. Chu Xuanyi smiled and said, if you don't change your clothes today, the maid of the Ji family will be punished. Xian Yuanyao frowned, turned his head and looked at the pale maid. He was about to get up to change his clothes, but heard Xiejing calmly say, no need to change. The air was so quiet, and everyone turned their heads to look at Xiejin at the same time. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 760. Ji Dongli's expression froze slightly, and then he smiled faintly. Master Ju, this is... No need to bother. Xiejin's voice sounded calm, without any emotional ups and downs. Prince Yao has never been very particular about these things. Let alone a few drops of tea, even if you spill ink on him, he won't care about it. Just go back and change it later, Master Ji, don't take it too seriously. Everyone was silent. He wouldn't care if ink was spilled on him. When did Master Ju of the Xie family become so good-tempered? Master Yao doesn't care, so does he not care? Ji Dongli smiled, I still think I should apologize, and today we are a guest at the Ji family, so we can't let people laugh at the Ji family's hospitality, right? Mo Lingon held the teacup and took a sip of cold tea. Master Ju of Xie doesn't like Prince Yao wearing other people's clothes, so Master Ji doesn't need to be polite, and people present will not laugh at the Ji family's poor hospitality because of this. After these words came out, Ji Dongli couldn't help but be silent. The voice of the maid crying in fear became clearer and clearer. Ji Dongli's eyes fell on her face, and he ordered lightly, take her out and slap her in the face 20 times, as an apology to Prince Yao. Yes. A burly old woman came over, grabbed the maid's arm and dragged her out, and the maid cried so sadly. Xian Yuanyao couldn't help frowning again, wondering what was going on with the Ji family. He said it didn't matter. Did he not understand what people said, or did he want people to know that his Ji family had strict rules? Or, did he deliberately want people to think that he was a difficult guest to serve, and he actually made things difficult for a maid? Yao Xiejin raised his eyes to look at him. The iced watermelon is good, sit down and try it. Xian Yuanyao looked at him, his eyebrows slightly twisted, as if he wanted to say something, but when he met Xiejin's calm and gentle eyes, he silently swallowed what he wanted to say and sat down again. Because of this episode, the atmosphere in the pavilion became a little subtle. In fact, it is not a big deal for a maid to serve poorly. No matter how well trained the maid is, such accidents are inevitable. It may be due to nervousness or negligence. After all, even the maids who serve the emperor in the palace make mistakes, let alone such ordinary little maids. Maids will be punished for making mistakes. If they meet a kind master, it is okay. A small punishment and a big warning will be fine. If they meet a cruel master, the maids will naturally be criticized more, and it is not uncommon for them to lose their lives at any time. But today's incident is far from the point where it is necessary to get angry. Usually, a reprimand will be fine. Xian Yuanyao said again and again that it was okay, but Ji Dongli insisted on making a fuss about the maid and asked people to punish the maid in public. Is this to give Xian Yuanyao an explanation, or is it intentional to make people think that he is not broad-minded enough? If this happened to the ladies today, it would obviously be a different story. It is well known that ladies have high requirements for the maids around them and pay great attention to their own dress and appearance. If a maid offends them, they will naturally be unhappy, even if the maid is criticized. But Xian Yuanyao is a military commander and a prince of the royal family, but he can't get along with a maid. I don't know what everyone will think. Master Xieju has a strong possessiveness. Chu Xuanyi broke the silence with a deep smile on his lips. Even Prince Yao can't wear other people's clothes. Xiejin held the teacup and smiled calmly when he heard it. Do you think it's fake that I dismissed the backyard for Yao Yao? Xian Yao's face was slightly hot, and he wanted to stuff a piece of watermelon into his mouth to make him shut up. But it's rare that Prince Yao is willing to listen to Master Zhu. Ji Dongli smiled nonchalantly. When His Majesty granted the marriage, didn't he grant Master Zhu to Prince Yao? Xian Yao raised his eyes and glanced at him. Is it okay for this prince to be henpecked? Henpecked? The others paused, and couldn't help coughing lightly or laughing. Amolingan almost spit out the tea in his mouth. Only Xian Yao sneered, you are really bored. You are so interested in this prince's affairs. Don't you have anything to talk about after dinner? Does this mean that they are gossiping? The expressions of the people were a little hard to describe. Xiejin smiled, holding the teacup and drinking the herbal tea carefully prepared by the Ji family, feeling that this summer didn't seem so hot and uncomfortable. Ji Dongli turned to look at Xian Yuanqi. Cousin, is my aunt okay recently? I haven't visited her these days, and I wonder if my aunt blames me. Xian Yuanqi smiled faintly. Why would she blame me? My mother has always been a quiet person, and now she has a beloved grandson. She doesn't have enough time to take care of her grandson at home, so naturally she has less things to deal with outside. Ji Dongli's smile froze slightly, pretending that he didn't hear his implication. There are many servants in the palace, so it shouldn't be necessary for my aunt to take care of the little grandson herself. No matter how thoughtful the servants are, they are bound to be negligent sometimes. How can you be assured of taking care of it yourself? Xian Yuanqi said in a faint tone. Besides, my mother only has this one precious grandson, so she naturally holds him in her mouth.